Go Big 12 or go home. I'm Brandon Shanahan, joined as always by Midwest broadcasting legend Drew Russell. Drew, we're here for another week. The Big 12 had a fun week. As a Husker fan, I sure had a good week. But oh my gosh, what a time to be alive!
What time to be alive, indeed, Brandon Shanahan. And the Big 12 did have, in general, a really nice week. A lot of good teams able to pick up some significant victories. Our contenders definitely took care of their damage. Colorado took care of Colorado State. Kansas State really made a statement against Arizona, even though that's not technically a conference game, but still made a statement, in my opinion, Brandon Shanahan. So, pretty significant week. I think, 4 teams in the top 20, 3 or 4?
Yeah.
Currently, none in the top 10, but man, you feel like we're knocking right now. We're knocking at potentially having 1 or 2 teams upcoming in the coming weeks that can crack that top 10 if they play their cards right in the Big 12 play.
I have a feeling this time next week we'll have one of the top 10, but I mean, that's just kind of what we expected this conference to be, was a lot of good teams, and then we'll see if anybody can separate and, be in that top 10 category, and that great team that everybody thinks we lost when Oklahoma and Texas left the league. But I think the conference is in good shape. Fared very well non-conference slates. I think we still got some work to do. SMU, has got to get taken care of by TCU. They got to take care of their business. But otherwise, yeah, good slates. Really the only real disappointment from the last week is Kansas, but we'll get into them. And speaking of surprises, I don't know if we've done this before, but there's realignment news that we should talk about. Feels like that cycle's never done.
No, it can't be, Brandon. There's no way there's more of this. It has to be done, right?
I thought we were set, but we're back. And so is the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is back. Who would have thought? I really thought that the Pac-12 was Oregon State and Washington State would just sit by, kind of let time go by so they can collect all the Pac-12 assets and then go on their merry way, maybe join the Big 12, maybe eventually join the Mountain West. But they're deciding to rebuild it, and they're starting with San Diego State, Fresno State, Colorado State, and Boise State to bring that up to 6 teams. And then it sounds like there's some rumblings for Memphis and Tulane. UNLV feels like a no-brainer from the Mountain West. But the Pac-12 is back. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought, indeed, Brandon Shanahan? And I'll tell you what, I think that conference has the potential to build itself into something. And it's going to take a lot of years, but the bare bones are there. And I'll look at, say, Washington State, for example. Everybody said they're cast for dead. They're done. They beat Washington this weekend in the Apple Cup game in Seattle. Pretty nice win for Washington State, I must say. These are not bad teams that are going to that conference. And I look at some of the potential guarding media markets, all that. They can build something. I'm not saying it's going to be a powerful conference, and they might even have to persuade a couple of old friends who might be in the ACC, but despite being on the Pacific Coast, but they might need to somehow convince them to come back. But of course, it comes down to money, and I don't know if they're going to do that or not. But got to hand it to the Pac-12, Brandon. They were dead. They were beyond dead. Everybody said those two will just absorb into the Mountain West. And instead they said, no, we're going to use this brand name that's existed for over 100 years, and we're going to try to build something here and see if they can save it. Whether they can or not, that remains to be seen. But a lot of credit to just Washington State and Oregon State and those presidents, those ADs for holding strong and then getting other schools to the table and coming to this agreement.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I didn't think this was even on the table for discussion, and all of a sudden Brett McMurphy dropped in the news. It's interesting. At first, I was like, why not just move to the Mountain West and then take the branding with you? They already got an infrastructure. They already got a full league's worth of teams. But it seems like now that they're looking outside of the Mountain West to rebuild this conference, like I mentioned, Memphis and Tennessee, it seems like they're kind of having their cake and eating it too. They're getting the good football and even a couple of good basketball brands out of the Mountain West, and then now they're targeting for the best teams they can poach in the American Conference. Or I mean, I think in a perfect world, Cal or Stanford would come back. I don't think that's on the table because of how they're locked in with the ACC. And the ACC is not going to let any teams go without a fight, even Cal or Stanford, who maybe aren't like their premier brands. But if they let them leave and then Florida State and Clemson find a way out, then the whole conference is actually imploded. And then their TV deal is void, and then it's a floodgate. So I don't think Cal and Stanford are on the table. Admittedly, and some of my bias being here in Texas, I would love to see the Pac-12 go after UTSA and UNT. I would love, a third. Depending on how you feel about the word power conference, but a third conference in the DFW area here with UNT. But we'll see. Tulane and Memphis seem kind of the direction that they're going, and good on them.
Yeah, and one thing I liked about the initial additions, Brandon, were they're all regional based.
Yeah.
I think that still matters in a conference. Now, I understand they have to survive and they have to build a conference and do whatever it takes. So I don't blame them for going out after a Memphis, Tulane, or other schools that might not make geographical sense, because really right now, outside of the SEC, there is not really a major conference that is within a region. I mean, everybody else, Big Ten is all over the country, Big 12 is all over the country, ACC is all over the country. So for the Pac-12, it makes sense that they want to also be all over the country, because that's the model for 3 out of 4 conferences right now. They're considered the big boys. Part of me is still an old school traditionalist, though, and hopes they kind of low key stay within a region just for the student athletes' sake, coaches, fan bases as well, if they choose to travel to road games. I doubt that's going to happen. And again, it all comes down to everybody's favorite color, green, and how much money they can make off of those television deals. But give the Pac-12 credit. Again, dead 15 years ago, it's hard to believe where they're at now, because they were one of the power conferences by far in college football and all college athletics. They were dead to rights, but they found a way to survive and advance.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot. I mean, we really got to get our good friend Vincent Adultman out here to run the numbers. But it really comes down to, is Memphis and Tulane so valuable that it adds enough value to, make it worth going cross country? Because I mean, that's the thing with the Big Ten and the Big 12, as far as like they're spread out, is that it didn't happen like that organically. It was, okay, well, we got to get this piece and we got to get this piece. When you're building the conference from scratch, you probably do, in a perfect world, want to keep it as regionalized as possible. But if, you can get if the TV money is worth, adding Tulane and that Memphis markets, which those are very good markets. So maybe that's the fighting point, but interesting stuff. $100 million going to the MWC, the Mountain West Conference, in buyout fees, which I think is very interesting. Because not only are you getting Mountain West caliber football teams, but now you're also dishing out a 9-figure check and payouts. I also saw something that they are only allowed to take 4 teams at first because of antitrust stuff, and it would open them up to some type of lawsuit from the Mountain West Conference if they just took their entire conference. So that would also lead me to believe that they're not done poaching the Mountain West. UNLV would be a prime suspect for that, especially how good that they've looked. Barry Odom's got that team buzzing. But interesting time. But we are a Big 12 podcast, and it is worth mentioning that in a world where they take up Memphis, they take Tulane, maybe they take UTSA or UNT, those are also potential Big 12 acquisitions here down the road if that's the way the chips fall for your mark and company. How do you think this will affect the Big 12 in the long run?
Yeah, for the Big 12, Brent Yormark has been very clear. They're looking to expand. They want to build, I think, almost a brand that's too big to fail. They're like the U.S. stock market, Brandon. Even if it plummets, it's too big to fail. There will always be money funneled right back in. You can count on that for sure. And I think the Big 12, that's what Brent Yormark's trying to do as well, is make this conference so big, like with member schools just nationally recognized, doing unique things, that it's too big to fail. And he's done a really good job. I'm sure from his perspective, he's keeping a very close eye on it. I'm sure they're looking at potential acquisitions from the AAC, maybe. I know that UConn flirtation happened just a few weeks ago, Brandon. That, for now, kind of off the table, but who knows? Like, we do know in college athletics, things can change in an instant. So, he's got a very close ear to the ground on it. And if he feels there's an opportunity that's going to help the conference, he'll have no problem adding more member schools.